Hello everybody and welcome back. Good to talk to all of you again today. And today I have a replay for all of you from Aloop, who's playing a Khabarovsk. Now, Khabarovsk today is not the crazy ship that she used to be when she first came out. You know, she's been power crept pretty hard by some of the other gunboats that have appeared in the game. She's also lost some of her torpedo utility. You know, originally when she first came out, she had like 10-kilometer torpedoes. They're down to 6 kilometers these days. That doesn't help. The fact that she's also one of 2 destroyers that takes full AP penetration from battleships generally means if you're into a lot of like high-tier BBs, it's a rough ship to play. I personally have not had much love for my Khabarovsk. In the fact, I think I've actually sold it just out of sheer frustration for the ship. But still, you know, in the event that you're still playing her, or you're still trying to play her, and you're a little confused as to what she's supposed to do, hopefully this video will be kind of useful. So, Loop at the beginning does what normally you wouldn't do, shall we say, in a Khabarovsk, which is you'll see him sort of move onto the cap here. Now, generally speaking, I would say this is probably not the world's best idea, just because Khabarovsk is not really a capping destroyer. I'd honestly expected to see more of a movement to the side here, just to try to provide, you know, supporting fire this way for whatever ship ends up coming near the cap for capping purposes. Now, of course, in this particular game, there's also a situation where Loop is also the only destroyer here, so I can kind of understand it, as well as the fact that there is this sort of giant island here, which does provide a certain degree of cover. So I can understand the decision making here, although the risks are high. If you have a situation like this, Smolensk gearing popping up like this is generally not particularly good, shall we say, for Loop. You know, this is the danger. If you get caught in a situation like that, you can get murdered very, very quickly. Now, I think Loop is actually quite fortunate. You'll see that the Smolensk essentially moves himself out of the ability to shoot at this because, you know, went behind the island. And also, the gearing decided to do the oh crap panic thing, and which is, you know, laying smoke. And as soon as that smoke line gets laid, what ends up happening is that the gearing loses all vision, all ability to support the Smolensk. And of course, the Worcester pushes in quite aggressively over there, hits the radar, and the gearing is spotted and murdered in the early stages of the game. Gearing misplayed that horribly. Another thing as well, if you were the enemy gearing, okay, and you were worried about a destroyer contact, which by the way should have been quite obvious because the cap got contested, the smarter thing as a gearing player, if you were on the other side, the smarter thing would have been to actually come over here, turn your ship out, you know, present your stern towards the, you know, the enemy team, and then in the event that anything happens, let's say you do get surprise spotted or whatever, you can just accelerate away without having to worry. It is very risky to, you know, dive in all the way, you know, get behind an island, and not only get behind the island, but then, you know, come out from the island. That's very, very risky because you risk having a situation where you run into things that you know, aren't aware that is coming, and then they melt your face off, like that just happened with that gearing over there. Typically, it would be much smarter to sit, you know, I would say in this particular map, you know, like maybe right there on the edge of the cap there, maybe even on this side as well, just sort of, you know, putting yourself at that very, very edge so that you are contesting the cap, but you also have the ability to escape. As you can tell, again, going back to the Khabarovsk that Loop is playing, Khabarovsk's general goal is to stay at a comfortable distance for the Khabarovsk, usually outside of 10 kilometers, ideally possible, and you're going to be spending a lot of time spamming HE at stuff that's angled, and in the event that you get something that is giving you a broadside, you can always switch over to the armor piercing. The Soviet 130mm AP is very, very good against broadside targets. Another thing to keep in mind, of course, and this is something you should pay attention to, because Loop does do a very, very good job demonstrating this, which is if you are hitting an enemy ship, what you want to do is target the superstructure. And the reason you want to do that is because the majority of you know, larger ships, whatever that you run into, you're not going to have the penetration to go through their armor. So targeting the superstructure is the only real reliable way to get penetration damage, and at the same time being able to, you know, obviously hit something that will eventually lead to fires as well. So hit superstructure, and of course, you know, do the whatchamacallit, like just sort of stay at distance and spam away kind of thing. And you'll see Loop does this sort of repeatedly. Of course, the Smolensk here, kind of trying to be sneaky, I guess, trying to use that border to scrub himself out. It is okay to try blind firing if you have a certain level of skill, but you know, if it doesn't work to a certain point, like, you know, let's say a lot of missed shells there, it might be okay sometimes to just stop shooting and get your concealment back. Anyways, very reasonable thing to do now, which is probably A, to kind of slide you know, in this direction, to A, get shots on this group of ships over here, the North Carolina and the Tirpitz, while at the same time, hopefully, that if the Smolensk eventually appears somewhere, to either be able to get shots or at least provide spotting for your team. That is always dangerous, regardless. Anytime a battleship salvos a Khabarovsk, that is always going to be a little bit of a dicey moment, just because that can lead to penetration damage, which does hurt quite a bit. Of course, Khabarovsk these days, you do have a heal, so at least you can get back some of that damage taken. Also, I would strongly recommend these days that if you are playing a Khabarovsk, to ideally play with a heal, not so much a smoke, as the heal is significantly more useful in most situations. Okay, so I'm expecting somewhere within the next little while here that you'll see Aloop sort of make this move over here to get onto the side, into the flank here. So what's going to happen is that you'll see his battleships are probably going to move, like, let's say somewhere around this way. You know, his Wooster's probably going to stay like right there behind that island. And so what's going to happen is if he decides to eventually go this way, he'll create a bit of a situation like this where, you know, it'll be a crossfire with his team. So the battleships, for example, will hold the enemy battleship's attention while Aloop is able to get on the flank and do work. Okay. Low HP Smolensk pops back out with only 4,900 HP. This is ideal for Aloop to try to get rid of him. Khabarovsk has pretty darn good arcs to this kind of distance here. And oh yeah, another thing as well. Also, do try to speed juke sometimes as well as a Khabarovsk. So, you know, slow down to half speed, then accelerate to full, then go to stop again, you know, so on and so forth. So you can really try to throw off enemy ships from shooting at you. Smolensk is trying desperately to go dark, but yep, in this kind of situation where it's not like Border, because Border has a tendency of making things weird, right? Because the ship slides instead of actually traveling normally. You can use the minimap indicator to kind of lead your shots. You know, like you can see, you can figure, okay, if this Smolensk is going to probably go in this direction, then you can put that little like lead circle on that area and just spam shots. And if you see hits, you can use that to kind of track your shots in and to get those hits in even on targets that are invisible. All right. This is basically the Khabarovsk job. So here we go. You can see Aloop has maneuvered himself into this kind of a position. He's right here. Enemy, the majority of his team is over here. Enemy team is over here. So now the enemy team has a problem, right? If they try to deal with him, these ships are going to be able to shoot at them. If they spend time dealing with these ships, then Aloop basically gets free farm. And that's what you want to do in something like a Khabarovsk, something that has good speed, something that has that, you know, high rate of fire, something that can basically be a very, very annoying pest. And it's like fundamentally that is what you are as a Khabarovsk. And this is true for all the preceding ships as well. I remember having a conversation once during stream where somebody was like, how do you play Kiev? And I'm like, well, you're basically a pest. You know, you're trying to be super, super annoying. Okay, also another thing to point out, remember I said earlier, shoot superstructure? You'll see, you'll see that Aloop almost exclusively targets that, the superstructure area. Superstructure is thin enough that the 130mm HE will penetrate, and you'll see penetration damage. Even though the damage itself is not high per shell, the sheer number of hits eventually does make up quite a bit of damage, as well as setting fires and getting that damage over time stack. Of course, in this game, another thing to point out, and this is something to point out, Aloop is in a tier 10 destroyer, a tier 10 gunboat, shooting at tier 8s. That is a notable advantage, but when you're dealing with other higher tier BBs, the idea is still the same. You're still targeting that superstructure, still trying to get hits there. Okay, so Tirpitz, as you can tell, there you go, there's another fire. That Tirpitz is probably going to die unless he's got a DCP ready here. Oh, actually, yep, he did have one ready. There we go. DCP got popped. So, of course, in that situation, because you know the DCP has been popped and because it is also a German battleship that the DCP is relatively short, you can definitely try to shoot, you know, until you can maybe trigger another fire if the situation is allowing you to do so. In this case, no such thing. Plus, there's a much more threatening target here in the Smolensk, and of course, the Smolensk isn't super healthy, so turn the attention that way. Oh. Now you might say, wait a minute here, why on earth is Loop throwing his 6 kilometer torpedoes against that Georgia that's still 8.8 away? This is a thing that you can do with certain ships that have, you know, torpedo ranges that maybe aren't great. What you can do is when an enemy ship is coming sort of towards you in your direction, and you started off here, what you do is you throw torpedoes and you make the sort of bet that if they keep closing the distance, they will eventually run into your torpedoes. And so this applies to like certain destroyers that don't have great torpedo ranges. As an example, for like, you know, one that a lot of people struggle with, Farragut, you know, with its short torpedo range. This can work on a Farragut. Now, Loop almost gets those torpedoes, but the Georgia, I think, was probably just that little bit out, maybe like another 100 meters or so. Could have been if Loop held off for another second on the torpedo drop, that Georgia there would have actually taken it. But that at least goes to show you how close those torpedoes had gotten, even though that Georgia was initially out at 8.8 kilometers at the initial torpedo drop. Okay, so this is another thing. As a Khabarovsk, when you are being given like kind of a broadside here, you can switch to AP, and you can see that the AP damage is quite consistent, right? Like, you know, 2.5k, 3.4k. There's actually quite a lot of damage, so definitely make use of it when you're given the opportunity to do so. Of course, this minute that the enemy ship gets angled enough so that your AP is no longer effective, do switch back over to HE. Now, as his team's battleships are pushing up, now you see the Sherpa is pushing up, the Bismarck is pushing up, NC is pushing up. So now, as these battleships became the main threat to the enemy team, as a Khabarovsk, what you can do now is you can sort of slide behind them, and you can be that second line DPM still. When you are no longer, let's say, on a flank by yourself, and you know the enemy has to sort of divide their attention. In the event that the enemy team can entirely focus their attention towards your direction, because let's say your team has moved up and you're sort of moving with them, you can stay in the second line and be that support. Khabarovsk, with its DPM, can put out the damage. Make no mistake that it can do that. But it's also a target that a lot of enemy ships, especially when there's, like, let's say BBs that are pushing against them, or maybe even other cruisers that are more easy to hit, a lot of enemy players will generally put their attention towards those targets first, right? The single Khabarovsk, you can just kind of leave it for a little while and see what happens. And of course, you know, obviously during that period of time, a Khabarovsk will be able to farm up, shall we say, that amount of damage. Okay, enemy team actually, even right now, still not looking too bad. You know, you've got this relatively good arc of ships, you know, on the enemy team. They're all sort of moving in relatively well. You know, they're all kind of just coming in. There's multiple battleships. Still Colbert down here that, you know, has great DPM. They still have a Smolensk, although currently not spotted. So enemy team, honestly, still has a chance even in this kind of a situation. Now, Loop's team, of course, has himself, who has already done 145,000 damage, and also noticed the 1.95 million potential. But also has still very powerful ships on his team as well, notably Worcester, Hindenburg. You know, these are strong ships that have the capabilities of outputting lots and lots of damage. So we'll see how Loop handles this. I mean, again, he's gone from the back line, now he's sort of moving up a little bit more, and I think he's probably going to start engaging again, probably at, around 13 kilometers. Why? Because it's not a range that a North Carolina is going to find super comfortable to retaliate against something that moves at the speed of a Khabarovsk. Of course, there we go. There is the Smolensk. Now, Smolensk is a much higher threat target, so immediate switch towards the Smolensk. You also notice that Loop again has cut speed, and now accelerating again, and then cutting speed again. You know, he does this a lot while he's playing the Khabarovsk. It's a valid tactic. You know, it really does have a tendency of throwing enemy teams off when they're trying to shoot at you. Because if they assume that you're always moving at a constant speed, it is a lot easier to figure out where to shoot you. When you're not, and you know, especially on top of that, coupled with the fact that you're also turning around and, you know, evading, and then you're also hitting this the speed to reduce it to down to like sub 20 knots, it really messes with the opponent's ability to aim. And then of course also speeding up. You know, you also then speed back up, and that is really frustrating. Okay, so again, you'll see target is always up here, right? Like, it's always in that superstructure area. You see like the shots are never at the water line or on the belt or whatever. It is always into that superstructure area, because the superstructure area is that reliable damage, and you do want that. Even though it's not a lot, that consistency of damage still builds up with the rate of fire that a Khabarovsk has. Now, Eventually, there's one other tip I'm going to give, but we'll get to that in a little bit. It's not there yet. Okay, eventually you're going to see this North Carolina is going to move to broadside, and this is where the AP should come out. Yep, there we go. You see the AP switch happening right now, because this is a good time to start firing some armor piercing. Now again, the armor piercing thing for destroyers, keep in mind that this is mostly targeted towards destroyers that have good ballistic performance, can actually do good damage with their AP. It's not all of them. Some of them aren't particularly great for these tasks, right? Like some of them with super floaty arcs, it's better to find other things to do. Okay, back into the high explosive, and alright, there we go. Target taken care of. There's the enemy Bismarck. Wow, their turrets ran. Their turrets ran really, really far away too. Okay, not really helping. I mean, I can understand maybe like his HP wasn't super good, so he's trying to pull away, but that's a little too far right now. Yeah, but I'm not sure that turret is gonna come back, but yeah. I mean, really, when they initially had that sort of nice approach, their team really should have pushed all together. Try to create as many different arcs of fire as possible, and dealing with that sort of northern group of ships. That, I think, would have been a lot more helpful. But that's okay. I mean, you know, that's what happens in random games. People don't always do things that you want them to do, so you do have to try to make the best of what you can. Again, pay attention to Loop's current positioning as a Khabarovsk, right? Battleship here, battleship here, battleship here. Look at where he is. Essentially that second line behind his BBs. He's playing that support role, being that annoying pest, right? That Bismarck does not enjoy this, right? Does not enjoy that there's some destroyer that's sitting at a hard-to-hit distance, hitting him with HE repeatedly. But you know, can he really turn his attention right now to go deal with Loop? Absolutely not. Because if he was to try to turn to bring all his guns to bear, he's going to go full broadside in front of a North Carolina, who's probably most likely going to flap him. But of course, if he doesn't deal with Loop, then he gets farmed. And again, watch this. He's going to go broadside, wait for the AP. Look at that. AP swap. And of course, when the AP gets swapped, where is it going to target? Probably into that superstructure, upper belt-ish area for the damage. And there we go. Okay. Enemy Turpits, yeah, not super healthy. Think he's going to try to come back in now. I think that's a little bit too late. His team has lost too many really, really healthy ships. I think their team made a bit of a mistake. They kind of came in a little bit piecemeal as well. You know, you pay attention to the way their ships came in. The battleships came in one at a time. You know, in each of that situations, if you're coming in one at a time, it becomes easier to deal with. When I'm playing my game, sometimes what I'll try to do is I'll look at a map and I'll see something that maybe isn't great, and the way sometimes I try to turn that battle around is to say, okay, is there a flank that there are ships that are too far apart to support each other mutually that I can, like, you know, engage them 1 versus 1 or 2 versus 1, so then I can maybe kill off individual ships and then hopefully try to swing a battle that way. Sometimes it works, and of course sometimes the odds are just too overwhelming, and of course that doesn't, but at least it gives me a better chance, because, you know, trying to go solo against like 3 different ships that are on like 3 different directions where you can't really angle effectively or whatever generally leads to a quick death. Okay, enemy Colbert. Yeah, he's behind a rock. He's being spotted by the Olan, so Loop is just going to get some more pew damage in there. Sitting at 195,000 damage. It's actually not a bad game at all for Khabarovsk, already high caliber and Confederate as well. Could have actually been a Kraken, considering that he had a couple of kills that were taken away from him, sort of like the last little bit of HP, you know, last 1,000 or whatever. He does get the Colbert kill. Now I'm gonna say this ahead of time because I know he's gonna get the Colbert kill, but I potatoed during the recording, and yeah, I missed the actual kill ribbon, but he gets it. I'll show you in the battle results screen. Anyways, all in all, in a nutshell, that is Khabarovsk's job. You know, you go onto flanks, you pepper people, you be annoying. You know, if you need to fall off detect, you do so. You speed jockey, you know, you throttle jockey, and you basically just play in a way that the enemy team, like, they hate you, they want to shoot at you, but if they were to try to come and shoot at you, they're going to put themselves into a vulnerable position. So that's kind of what you want to do as a hub. Be the pest, be annoying, be that hateful little ship that, you know, everybody doesn't enjoy having on certain places, but then you're there doing that kind of damage. Also, make sure to target your superstructure with your armor piercing, high explosive and armor piercing when you have their broadside. All right, let's take a look at the results screen, because as you can tell, 123 HP left, last shot hits, and then that is it. All right, let's take a look at that final results screen. So there we go, 205,839 damage, Confederate, Dreadnought, High Caliber, 594 hits, a lot of hits obviously, because with gunboats that's what we want to do, keep utilizing that DPM. Almost a Kraken, 4 ships sunk, could have actually been as high as 6 ships sunk actually there, 11 fires. Base experience 2709, so that's a very, very solid amount. I mean, anytime you're really in the high 2000, that's really, really good. And there you go. Like, look at the 130k in HE, 34k in AP, 41k through fire damage. So a very, very solid game overall. Anyways, folks, that brings us to the end of today's video. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Aside from all that, take care, have yourselves a good one, and I'll talk to all of you again soon.